Welcome back to No Trade Clause, live from the SBC studio at the 2021 Las Vegas Summer League. As we continue to cover the biggest stories from around the league, we're joined in studio today by Ryan Mcdonough, former GM of the Phoenix Suns, former assistant GM of the Boston Celtics, a team he won a championship with in 2008. Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. How's the summer been treating you? Busy, I assume?
Yeah, it's been great. Always good to be on with you guys. Enjoy your work on the website. Summer's been terrific. Been doing a lot of broadcasting between Audicy, NBA TV, NBC Sports Boston, and really excited to be back here in Vegas at Summer League. It's hard to believe it was over 2 years ago that we were here. It was tough missing it last year because this is one of my favorite events. It's a place to see everybody in the league and reconnect with people and get to know some new folks like you guys. So great to see you guys, and I'm excited to do this show and then go watch some good basketball as well.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. Yeah, last couple of weeks it feels like you've been everywhere in the media, so we're lucky to have you. Ryan, let's jump right into it. You were the assistant GM with the Celtics and then spent 5 years as the GM of the Suns. How would you explain the role of a general manager?
It's really grown as the job has grown and the staffs have grown. When I started in the league in 2003, almost 20 years ago now, the staffs on the coaching side and the front office side, you could probably count the key individuals really on one hand. Now, I think by the end of my time with the Suns in 2018, we had over 50 people reporting to me directly. So you're really like the CEO of the basketball team. You're overseeing the players on the floor and the coaches. That's what gets the most attention. But you're also in charge of the training staff, the sports science staff, the analytics department, and everything that really impacts the team on the floor. So it's a big job. There are a lot of moving parts. You have 15 to 17 players on the roster, including the two-way contracts. You're trying to monitor over 400 players in the NBA, and then you're also trying to keep track of hundreds more either in college or overseas, in the G League or what have you, and then keep those relationships strong with ownership, the media, the fans, agents, other teams. So I could go on, but as you see, there's a lot there, and it's become a pretty big job.
Hey, Ryan, we hear a lot of times, especially in SBC, they really printed this message on us. The fact that being well-rounded in the basketball industry is a huge plus, and it seems like the fact that you had your hands in so many different. Are there any particular jobs that you had prior to your stint as GM? Any kind of stints that stand out to you that really helped you kind of form that complete package when it came to the skills and that job?
Yeah, so I'll take you back to college. I went to University of North Carolina 1998 to 2002, and I worked in the athletic department, just trying to experience as many different things as I can, because as you guys know, everybody's path is different. It's never a straight line, and there are never two people who do it exactly the same. So I tried to work with as many different sports teams as I could in college. And there are a lot of famous stories on the coaching side of guys who have started in the video room and then gone on to be successful NBA head coaches. In fact, just a year ago in the Orlando bubble, two of them, Frank Vogel and Eric Spoelstra, played for the NBA championship. So those guys started in the video room, not a lot of money, grinding film, putting packages together for the coaches and players, and worked their way up the ranks and really got a PhD in basketball and how to coach it and how to teach it. And I bring it up because you can't do what those guys did or what I did anymore because technology with Synergy and Second Spectrum has automated a lot of that.
Sure.
But I think that the challenge now is trying to figure out a new way to add value and to be well-rounded and do different things. The people I've seen have the most success quickly are the ones who can fill gaps and become experts in things like the collective bargaining agreement, like analytics, like sports science, that when you interview with the team looks at you and says, wow, that's pretty interesting. We don't have anybody here who can do that, or I just learned something from talking to him or her. That person would really be a good addition to our organization.
I'm glad that you brought up the head coaches, Spoelstra and Vogel, and their experience, because we actually had a theory recently that is pretty interesting. So, a lot of these head coaches in their second stint have a higher success rate, or at least it seems like that from our perspective, than their first stint, because they had so much from their first experience that they learned that they improved upon going into that second stint. So, if you were to, I'm not sure if you kind of considered this, but if you were to go back to a position in the front office for a team, is there anything that you learned in those stints previously that maybe you would change or do differently if you had another opportunity?
Oh, sure. No question about it. And I think anybody who's done the job, regardless of how much success you've had would be lying if they said they do it exactly the same way. I think the challenges now are communication, and that I think applies really to any industry, especially in the NBA, because you think of how social media, talking about changing technology and things like that, how over the last 10 years, the last 5 years in particular, that Twitter and Instagram and some of the social media posts have changed things. Players demanding a trade or wanting a player on their team or becoming frustrated with something. And as you guys know, we can all react to it right here with our phones and computers quickly.
Yep,
and if you hit send, it's out to the world. So things like that in terms of building the relationships, coming up with a plan for, hey, look, I know if you're frustrated or if I'm frustrated, let's just not go on Twitter and put something inflammatory that makes you look bad and makes me look bad and creates more work for the organization. Let's come up with a plan and a protocol. More than anything, let's develop the relationship so even if I get on you or you get on me, there's a mutual trust and respect, and we know it's coming from a good place. So that's one of the things that's really important. It's really hard to do. Developing relationships with the players in particular. I think, the greatest coaches, whether it's Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, whoever you think are the best guys doing it now, they've really done that when they push and they demand, the players respond in a positive way because, as we've seen in the NBA, the players make a lot of money. There's a lot of turnover in the league right now, and if you press too hard and you don't have those relationships, it's easy for guys to let go of the rope, and that's how I think you've seen some coaches in particular lose the locker room or lose players pretty quickly, and that's when you get into some issues with the trade demand or player leaving in free agency or something like that. So more than anything, for me at the top of the list, communication, relationships, and then just a mutual trust and respect. And if you're able to do those things, I think you have a good chance to be successful.
For sure.
Awesome. Yeah, we hear all the time, it's a relationship business, so that makes complete sense. Ryan, let's pivot now to the offseason. Just last week, the offseason officially opened, and as usual, we saw a ton of deals flood in all at the same time. One thing that's puzzling for me is what's happening to Dennis Schroeder. Earlier this year, he declined a 4-year, $84 million extension, and now we're more than a week out of free agency opening. He's still without a team. What happened here, and where do you see him landing?
The market moved, and it moved quickly, and that's the unfortunate part of the business. We all see the stories of, on the other end of the spectrum, a guy like Duncan Robinson, who was a Division III player at Williams College and then undrafted at Michigan, just signed a $90 million deal. Those are the feel-good stories that make you feel great about the business and what Duncan did individually. I mean, think of how that changes his life and his family's life. At the other side of it, Schroeder seemed like he left $80 million plus on the table with the LA Lakers. And that's one of the challenges about the business is, as an agent or as somebody who's around the players, even on the team side, you see it sometimes, the market moves quickly and it seems like there's a lot of money and there is a lot of money, but under certain scenarios, if that cap space gets filled by teams that need point guards and like somebody else better than you, even if as a player you're second on a lot of teams' boards, well, you're always second. So you're still not signed, and then the money dries up, and instead of $80 million, Schroeder's looking at maybe a 1-year deal, on the non-tax mid-level, something, in the I don't know, $6 to $9 million, $10 million range, somewhere in there. So that's the difficult part about it. I reported that Victor Oladipo turned down a 3-year extension in the $80 million range, $75 to $80 million range from the Indiana Pacers. I think that was late last year. I reported that. That was part of the reason the Pacers traded Oladipo to Houston. Houston offered Oladipo a 2-year deal in the $46 million range. That was reported by ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. He turned that down. Now he's on a 1-year minimum contract. So I think Schroeder, to answer your question more directly, I think he has to do what Oladipo did. He has to find not the most money, but the best situation that's going to give him a role and an opportunity to play and play well and then be back in the marketplace next year, because as you guys know, the theme of this year, at least for me at a high level, we're point guards, Chris Paul, Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry, and others, Lonzo Ball. And so teams preferred those guys to Schroeder, and now, again, most of the big money's been spent, and Schroeder's left, instead of an $80 million deal, he's maybe looking at close to $6 million for 1 year.
It's a very unfortunate situation, like for Schroeder, and there's a couple other point guards that had deals recently signed, and one of those is Lonzo Ball, and some of that money that dried up that you mentioned went to him. He goes to the Bulls, and it was a very complicated multi-team deal, and it brings Devontae Graham to the Pelicans now on a 4-year, $47 million contract. So we wanted to kind of bring some scenarios to you and give your perspective, from a front office perspective on some of these deals, and maybe see exactly what you maybe would have done, exactly what you think about it. So when it comes to this deal, which kind of player and contract would you want if you're acquiring one of these guards for your team? And another question that we had, we talked about this the other day, is if they're going to bring in a guy like Devontae Graham, would it have just been better to just kind of keep Lonzo on that deal for the Pelicans and bring him in, since he seemed to have some synergy with Zion? What were your initial impressions of that decision that the Pelicans made, and the Bulls and the Hornets to kind of make that multi-team deal?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's also interesting because it's getting investigated by the NBA for jumping the gun on free agency. The two deals, as you know, are the one you mentioned involving Chicago and New Orleans, and then Miami and Toronto for Kyle Lowry, involving Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa. So we'll see how that pans out. I think New Orleans came into free agency with high aspirations of getting a star, whether that's Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry. I personally prefer Lonzo Ball to Devontae Graham. It seems like that relationship had frayed a little bit, and Lonzo didn't want to be there anymore. And that's one of the challenges, again, as you talk about from an executive perspective. Lonzo Ball was a restricted free agent, so you're under no obligation to send him elsewhere. You could, if you don't want to give him an extension, basically match any offer that comes in, or if that doesn't happen, have him sign the qualifying offer. It seemed like New Orleans, agreed with Ball that it was time to move on for whatever reason, and brought in Graham. Now, I like Devontae Graham's shooting ability. I think he's a little limited in some other areas. So I'm not sure, New Orleans, again, they blew open a bunch of cap space. I'm not sure just getting Graham is what they had in mind. So of the teams involved, I like it, I guess, the best for Chicago. I think they're significantly improved. Now, the question for the Bulls is it good enough to get up with the Brooklyns, the Milwaukees, Philadelphia? I'm not sure it is, but I do think the Bulls have a chance to be one of the top 6 teams in the Eastern Conference and avoid the play-in, which would obviously be a big step for a team that wasn't in the top 10 and missed the play-in this past season.
For sure.
Yeah. Another interesting transaction that just happened recently was Julius Randle. He signed a 4-year, $117 million extension. If we waited until next offseason, he could have signed for a max of 5 years, $207 million. That's a difference of $90 million less than the max contract he could have signed. This was the least amount of money any player who's made an All-NBA team in the last 3 years has taken. That's not on a rookie deal. Did Julius Randle make the right decision from your perspective? What were your thoughts on that extension?
He did something that not a lot of players do. He said it's not about the money. And guys say that all the time, but it really is about the money, for a vast majority. And I think we understand that. Any of us working, you'd like to make as much money as you can. But Julius, to his credit, he bounced around a little bit. With the Lakers, New Orleans, he found a home in New York. And he embraced the franchise. They embraced him. I don't think many people, so I certainly didn't predict they'd be a top 4 team and have home court advantage in the Eastern Conference. And Randle was the main reason for that. So I think he looked at it and said, look, $100+ million is a lot of money. It's not $200+ million, as you mentioned, but as we talked about with Dennis Schroeder and Victor Oladipo, there is some downside risk too. There's a chance. I don't know. You could put different percentages on it, but that he's not an NBA player or gets hurt or the team doesn't play as well. I think, in my opinion, that's likely the Knicks aren't a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference next year. So again, I give him credit because we could come up with some tough examples like Schroeder, like Oladipo, like New Orleans Noel going back, of guys who left a lot of money on the table and thought the number would be greater in free agency, and it wasn't. It was actually significantly less. He took the bird in hand, so to speak. He put over $100 million in his pocket, and more than anything, like I said, he committed to the franchise, who believed in him and where he thrived and grew. Good for him. It's great for the franchise. I really have shifted on the Knicks offseason. I had some concerns initially coming in, wondering why they signed Fournier and their own players, Burks, Rose, and Noel, to 3-year deals. Then that was a piece of news that I broke, that they were only Fournier's was a 4-year deal with an option, team opt-out after 3. The other guys were 3-year deals with team options after 2 years. So when that happened, I liked the free agents period a little better. And then when they got Kemba Walker with their cap space and the buyout from OKC, I liked it a little more. And now with Randle's extension, I like it a lot. So I've really come all the way around on New York. I think they've had a pretty good offseason overall.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Initially, when the reports were coming out, I thought, what are they doing? These are such long contracts. And as more details came out, the narrative shifted quickly. Another interesting transaction was DeMar DeRozan. He signed with Chicago via sign-in trade for 3 years, $85 million. A lot of people were pointing out that when Chicago agreed to this deal, nobody else really had any cap space left. So they were wondering, why did they bid so high against themselves? Now, could that have been because the discussions were happening before and they wanted to, stay true to the verbal agreements that may have been made, regardless of how that landscape was changing? What were your thoughts on that DeRozan deal?
DeMar DeRozan's a good player. I put out a tweet saying that I thought teams, when they had some cap space left, but the market had moved at the high end, should overpay him on a one-year deal. That's what Philly did a couple years ago with J.J. Redick. My last offseason in Phoenix, GM of the Suns, we did that with Trevor Ariza. You know it's an overpay in terms of the dollars, but you hopefully improve your team and then retain your future flexibility. And if things don't go well, then it's a trade chip, even a couple months later as you approach the trade deadline. So that's what I thought, the market may be for DeRozan. What I will say is this, and this may sound, I guess, however it sounds, but when the game starts and the ball goes up in the air on opening night, the fans really don't care as much about how much a guy makes. It's just, is your team good enough? Is your team competitive? Yep. So as a front office and as an ownership group, that's kind of your problem. So if the Bulls look at it and feel like they have Patrick Williams and some of these guys, and now with Lonzo Ball coming in on cost-controlled salaries. Now, I know they have Zach LaVine up for an extension this offseason, which, as you and I have discussed, he probably won't sign and hit free agency next year. That'll be key for them. But what the Bulls are doing, I give them credit, and I always like teams that are consistent in the direction. The Bulls are being aggressive. They started the trade deadline with Nikola Vucevic. They sent out 2 firsts in that deal. One of them was a mid-lottery pick that Orlando used to draft Franz Wagner. And then, they owe one more pick to Orlando, and now they owe a pick to San Antonio. So we'll see how, certainly the team is better. As I mentioned, I think they're a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference and avoid that play-in. Now, is it good enough to get into the top echelon of the conference and be an Eastern Conference finalist or an NBA finalist? I personally don't think so, but they have significantly improved, and I give them credit. If you're going to start being aggressive, I've always thought keep being aggressive, or the other way, if you're going to be conservative, try to build it so the moves together make sense, even if individually, like with DeRozan, it may look like a slight overpay.
Right. Those are great points, Ryan. And, DeRozan is one of many players in free agency that were signed to a lucrative contract at the other side of age 30. He just turned age 32 recently. And Chris Paul kind of flows into that theme as well. The Suns came out here and offered him a 4-year, $120 million contract for 4 years. And as reported by Bobby Marks, only $75 million of that deal is guaranteed. So the Suns are going to wait and see kind of how he progresses as he gets into his later 30s to see if he's continuing to be as productive as he is today. But we wanted your thoughts on this contract because he's getting up there in age and he has been productive and he had a great run that brought the Suns to the finals this past season. But, there are questions to be asked as whether or not they should have offered him that many years and that much money. So, what were your thoughts when you saw that? Were you kind of concerned that was too many years, or do you feel like it's a valid chance to take on him considering the fact that only about $75 million of that is guaranteed?
Yeah, I think they mitigated the risk with the partial guarantee in the 3rd year and then the non-guarantee in the 4th year with triggers. One of the interesting themes for me, we were talking about at the beginning of the segment about getting into a front office or what teams look for. One of the things that I think some of the smartest men and women are doing are already thinking about things to look at in the future. And I bring that up because I think one of the things that I'm personally fascinated to see, and we won't know for years, but how do the guys, especially the smaller point guards in their mid-30s, and there were 3 of them this year, Chris Paul, Mike Conley, and Kyle Lowry, how do those guys age and how do their contracts look in hindsight? When we look back in 2023, 24, 25, somewhere years from now, I would say, were those good decisions? Those guys were still playing very well. Historically, if you look at the aging and productivity curve, there's generally a pretty significant drop-off, especially from smaller guards in their mid to late 30s.
Yep.
But the counter-argument to that is, I think sports science and nutrition, Chris Paul's gone vegan, and now with compression sleeves and hydration and sleep studies and all that, can players prolong their career and stay effective later? I mean, LeBron James continues to do it at a super high level, which nobody's ever done. That's why he's approaching the NBA's all-time scoring record. So those are things that I think, you should be thinking about looking forward and starting to track them, as soon as opening night next year. How do these guys age? How do the contracts look? Because history books are being rewritten. It used to be the mindset in NBA was players peak in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, and then you don't want a guy after 32, 33. It's now as guys continue to have success, you don't want to be the guy who says it was looking at data from 15 to 20 years ago and saying, well, I wasn't accounting for all this new science and technology that are helping these players thrive. So, I think Phoenix did what they have to do. Keep in mind their backup point guard, Cameron Payne, was also an unrestricted free agent. And
yes,
look, that's the way it usually goes in unrestricted free agency. Player can sign with any team. The team has no matching rights, his incumbent team. So in order to sign the player, historically the way it goes is you have to pay him the most, and that's unless there's some kind of, maybe Julius Randle was an anomaly, although I guess that's an extension, so it's a little different because he's under contract. But if you look at the history of unrestricted free agency, the teams that offer the the most money, by and large, get the players, and that's why I'd be interested to see how those three teams, Miami with Lowry, Utah with Conley, and Phoenix with Paul, how they look a couple of years from now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fascinating. What we're seeing now is definitely a whole new trend. You didn't used to see older point guards or older players in general getting such large deals. I guess only time will tell if these are good decisions and how this plays out. Now, obviously, overall, there's a ton of movement around the league. Which team ultimately stood out to you as the biggest winner this offseason?
Miami's the first team that comes to mind. I really like their toughness and grit. Obviously, they were in the finals just a calendar year or so ago in the Orlando bubble. Didn't play as well this year. As I look at their starting lineup with Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, P.J. Tucker, and Bam Adebayo as 4 of the 5 starters, I don't think there's a tougher team in the league than that. So they're tough, they're gritty. They are older, so we'll see how those guys hold up physically. But I think they improved a lot, and especially re-signing Duncan Robinson, keeping the core of their team intact, and getting Oladipo at a minimum. You talk about a steal. If he's healthy or when he's healthy, even if there's a slim chance he's healthy or misses a lot of the year, it's still worth the risk at a minimum salary. Miami stands out to me. And then another team, like the Knicks, that I had some questions about coming into it. I like what the Clippers have done, more short-term than long-term, but they were a team to me that was kind of on the brink this offseason. Would they lose Reggie Jackson? Would they lose Nicholas Batum? Would they lose Serge Ibaka? Keep in mind, this was a team that went to Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals without Kawhi Leonard. They beat Utah without him the last couple of games and then took Phoenix to 6 games. So I think the thought process in L.A. is, just to hang in there. Can they hang in that middle of the Western Conference playoff pack and then hopefully get Kawhi back late in the regular season or in the playoffs? Because I think the core of their team's pretty good, and I think hopefully when Kawhi Leonard is healthy, they're a championship contender. But without Kawhi, they're not going to run through the league. This is more of a long-term play or a longer season play looking at the Clippers.
Those are excellent points, Ryan, and thanks for your insight on those deals. And a lot of us have questions about some of the intricacies of these deals and, whether or not they make a lot of sense long term. So those are, excellent points. It makes a lot of sense. To switch gears here as we wind down this conversation, we wanted to get your thoughts on a course in Vegas held every year, except for last year during COVID, called Sports Business Classroom. Me and Anil were a part of that course previously. We're alums of that course. And, it really helped us as far as breaking into basketball, making connections, building our skills, and a bunch of other beneficial parts of that course. So, with teams trying to find talent and organizations trying to find talent, that's a great place to go. So do you have any advice as far as what you would say to somebody who's trying to land a role in sports, just wants to get started? What would your advice to be of someone that's in a position like that right now that may be considering going to Sports Business Classroom in the future?
I think it's a great program, and I've been involved with it as an executive with the Boston Celtics and Phoenix Suns, and now on the broadcast side. And I haven't seen anywhere else where you're going to get that level of immersive experience. You may be able to steal 5 or 10 minutes here or there with a coach or an executive, but you're not going to have a week. And you're not going to do a practicum and be judged by experts, former executives, members of the media, people who really know different aspects of the NBA. Some of the stuff we've talked about here, analytics, sports science, how to deal with the media, all that. It really is an immersive course. And if I'm back with the team, which I think is probably likely at some point, again, you spend your time, most of your time at the top of the pyramid in terms of your star players, your head coach, your owner. So if you need to fill jobs, especially entry-level jobs of people who are young men and women looking to get their foot in the door, one of the first things I would do, probably the first thing I would do, would be call Larry Kuhn or Warren LeGarry or Albert Hall and say, look, here's what we need. Do you have anybody? And that's what Sports Business Classroom has become, and that's the reputation that they built. A lot of hungry men and women who are predominantly young, but don't have to be young. You can do it at any age. But when you're a team, it's hard because you get so many resumes and so many people you meet just briefly, but you don't get to know them. Getting to know Anil, work with him, and others, you're really impressed by it, and then it becomes, as we discussed in the beginning of the segment with players, a relationship business. So all it takes is one, coach, executive, owner, whoever, to like you and give you an opportunity. That's what happened to me in Boston almost 20 years ago now. And I think there's no better place to get started, to build your resume, get that experience in Sports Business Classroom, regardless of your level coming into it, whether you're a CBA expert or just really, starting to learn a little bit about the NBA, you'll be a lot smarter and know a lot more going out of it. And you'll also really have developed a good network of people that you can rely on. And who knows, maybe someday can help you get a job and get your foot in the door as well.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. My takeaway, it's a relationship business. Keep nurturing those relationships. Well, Ryan, I I think I can speak on behalf of our audience when I say it was a pleasure to hear your perspective on some of these things here. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us, and we wish you the absolute best going forward. Folks, that brings us to the close of another No Trade Clause broadcast. Thanks so much for tuning into our conversation, and we hope you enjoyed it.